Good morning, good evening, or whatever time it is where you are, and welcome to Talking Games with Steph and James.
I'm Steph.
And I'm James. Seamless. So, to begin with, first and foremost, who the hell are we? Steph, who the hell are you?
Okay, so I am a video game journalist. I've been in the field for about only a year and a half, so I'm still kind of a newbie. I worked as an editor at The Gamer, but I have since left for a new site. I usually just refer to it as VGK because it's spelled VG Kami, and I'm not really sure if that's pronounced correctly because I've never heard it out loud. So there you go. That's who I am.
And we'll never know.
No, we'll never know. And James, who the hell are you?
So hi everyone, I'm James, and you may have seen or heard my various ramblings on a site called Pass the Controller. For the last 5 or 6 years or so, been writing various things on there, all on my own steam, and attending a few events and stuff like that over the years. Not as much in recent years, as you might imagine. But yeah, I've been, passionate about games for many years, and so we thought between the two of us we might give a good impression of what this whole Elden Ring game is about. Have you heard of this game, Elden Ring, Steph?
Yeah, okay, so Elden Ring, there's a lot to unpack here. I know people at this point are probably maybe a little bit sick of talking about it. I don't know. I feel like people are either on extreme ends of the spectrum, like they either can't get enough of this and they're still obsessed, or they just would rather talk about anything else on the planet at this point with how much it's been going around on Twitter and whatnot.
I like to feel as though that enough time has passed now so that the dust has settled a little bit, because I think the hype train was at full steam before, even last year when they did the technical test coming into the actual launch, and obviously everyone went mad for it, and obviously the sales have been ridiculous. I mean, we're talking over 20 million, I think, is that right? Oh no, sorry, over 12 million, which is well above the biggest in the series for a SoulsBorne game to date, something like that. So particularly because both Steph and I are coming at were coming at Elden Ring from a very much newbie to the SoulsBorne genre place. We had a chat about it, and we thought it would be interesting to hear us ramble about it for a length of time. So here we are, and that's the story that basically of it all. But Steph, have you had any dealings with SoulsBorne stuff before Elden Ring?
So I don't have a lot playing myself. I did watch my husband play through all of Dark Souls 3 and also Sekiro. And I did attempt Dark Souls 3 myself, but the very first quote-unquote tutorial boss, just the fact that people refer to that as the tutorial boss made me so angry with the amount of times that I died trying to fight it. I decided then and there that Souls games were not for me. It was very difficult, and I was very angry and swore them off for good. But then I heard about Elden Ring and George R.R. Martin's involvement with it, so I was kind of drawn to it, thought maybe I'd give it a chance, but yeah, I essentially had no experience aside from that one tutorial boss leading up to this. How about you?
So for me, I did review Dark Souls 2 many years ago now, obviously, when it first came out. But I think it's fair to say that I never really got it. I went at it from a very pragmatic point of view. I never really sort of bought into the vibe of it or the kind of the lore of any of it. So you could say I was crushingly unqualified to review the game at the time. So apologies to anyone who read that review and was like, what the hell is this person talking about? But I think it was interesting in the sense that there were kind of glimmers and moments within it which kind of stick with me even now. Moments whereby, because of the design of these sorts of games, you can go in a certain direction and just completely miss specific things. I mean, even more so with Elden Ring being open world, but even back in those days, I stumbled across a boss that you can just not fight at that point at all and fight him later, and that's it, kind of thing. And it kind of blew my mind, I suppose, at that point, and to the extent that I just couldn't wrap my head around it at all. And it was just like, no, I mean, it's fine, it's good, it's all whatever, but it wasn't really my cup of tea, as we say on this side of the pond. So from that point, I think really the kind of hype around Elden Ring is what kind of drew me into starting to think about this game seriously. As you say, George R. R. Martin's involvement is kind of an interesting an eyebrow raise, if you like. When I heard the announcement of the game, at first of all, I was like, okay, this might be something a bit different. But really, I think the structure, and particularly that technical test, I'm going to refer to it incorrectly. I'm sure it wasn't called that, but I'm going to keep calling it that now. So tough. But that technical test was a kind of a way in for me to sort of have a little paddle in the water of it, if you like. And I went in with a lot more appreciation of what this series or this genre, if you like, that has been created by FromSoft is all about. And I think that is quite important when you enter the fray almost, because if you go at it expecting a kind of hand-holding, forgiving experience, not that I necessarily was even in the first place, but if you do it come in expecting that, you're immediately going to come up against resistance, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And I think that is a kind of key shift from when I looked at this kind of, as I say, years and years ago now. And part of that as well is coming from having seen a lot more playthroughs, as you say, you know, secondhand playthroughs of some of these games. And particularly, I had a really good experience with Emilition's playthrough of Bloodborne from start to finish, which I think obviously that only just finished, but that was a kind of, I guess, spurred me on to kind of give it a go, really, and to not kind of give up so easily. So here we are. So
I do want to throw in here that I wouldn't say I went into it expecting my hand to be held, but I was definitely one of the people who was under the impression that Elden Ring was going to be significantly easier than the other FromSoft games. I don't know why I was under that impression anymore. I think there were comments about it being more accessible, and somehow maybe it's because I wanted to believe that it was going to be easier because I wanted to love it. So I just took that to mean, you know, oh, it's not going to be like extremely impossible right off the bat, like Dark Souls 3 or, you know, any of these other games that I haven't played, but, you know, heard about how difficult they are. But
you hear, don't you? You always hear stories. You hear these kind of, or clips, or people hunting for platinums or whatever, and you're like, that game came out like a million years ago. How are these people still kind of, you know, discovering and kind of replaying and all this sort of stuff, these games? But I think it's a testament to the development team, honestly, you know, which is obviously the reason that we're even here sat today talking about this in the first place. But the amount of detail and effort that goes in, I mean, that's something that couldn't be denied. Even if a game isn't for you, you can't deny that these games are really kind of deliberately made. Like everything about them is so, you know, thought through and actually implemented. I mean, whether or not the implementation works for you, they've made the game they wanted to make. It feels like, anyway.
Definitely.
So let's get into my very loose structure for our discussion, I suppose. Now we've sort of set the scene. I've got some very cleverly titled chapters, and I'll put some time codes in the description below for these so that you can jump around and ignore vast swathes of whatever we're going on about if you want to. So the first point, and I think that this comes, you know, inevitably it comes at the beginning, but is kind of an interesting journey within itself for both of us, I think I'm right in saying, is becoming Tarnished, looking at thinking about the classes in the game and creation of character, because it is an RPG after all. You know, I think we both found it a bit of a challenge even from the word go.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so my experience with the classes in Elden Ring was interesting. So I originally started as an astrologer because I was told that magic in FromSoft games, it's like the easy route. And so I was like, you know what? Yeah. Given how much I struggled at the beginning of Dark Souls 3, I was like, you know what? I'll do magic. Hopefully that'll give me like a little leg up and I'll be able to get somewhere. And that did not work out for me. I got to, what is the place called? The Gatefront Ruins, I believe, at the beginning of the game in Limgrave, where all the knights are or whatever. Yeah, so I went there, and I couldn't even I spent hours and hours just trying to clear out that area, which now just is so embarrassing and laughable. But at the time, I know the one. Yeah. I just got killed over and over and over. Like, yes, it was nice to be able to hit things from far away with magic. But first of all, at the beginning of the game, you run out of FP like extremely quickly, and so that didn't really work. But also, when it comes to any enemies that are like even slightly skilled whatsoever, like with higher HP, I was dead instantly. Like, as soon as I would get hit by anything, I was just instantly dead because my defense or HP was so low as the astrologer class. So I ended up switching. I gave up and I switched to the hero class. And I was like, I remember posting about this on Twitter, and I was like, oh my God, guys, this totally changes the game for me. Like, this is amazing. And I got through the Gatefront Ruins and I felt so good about myself. I thought I was a total badass. And it's because I was relying on my shield to block hits, and then you can block hits and then hit them right after. And little did I realize that was going to be useful for about 5 seconds at the beginning of the game, and then no one gives a shit about your shield after that. Like they knock your ass on the ground and you still die. So I went straight back to being frustrated, and ultimately ended up going back to my astrologer build. And
interesting.
Yeah, so it was really weird experience at the beginning of the game. Eventually, I realized how to effectively use the astrologer. So at this point in the game, I still haven't finished it yet. Had to interrupt myself for triangle strategy for a little while, but at
if
this point,
if there is indeed finishing as much as you can,
right,
obviously to complete the story. But
that's a good point. Yeah, but at this point, I can effectively use the astrologer class, and I can kick some ass with my magic spells. But yeah, that's kind of how my experience went. You want to share kind of how your journey started?
Yeah, I mean, similar lines, actually, interestingly enough, but I didn't have the impression necessarily that magic was the easy way to go, but I know that, so my history with RPG in general, not necessarily in games, actually, probably is more from my teenage years in like D&D, Dungeons and Dragons world. And in that sort of setting, often the mage or wizard classes, although they can do high damage, they are also very weak, especially at lower levels. And that comes into gaming in, I don't know, Phantasy Star Online that I played a lot of way back when, and that sort of thing. So I knew that it wasn't necessarily going to be an easy route, but I thought it was less intimidating than sort of jumping into the fray right up close and personal with these guys, because I knew that traditionally with, I don't know, again, games like maybe Dragon Age series and stuff like that, I would tend to go for a more, roguish dexterity builds, long range class or something like that, whereby I would just kind of sit back a little bit and not sort of get sucked into absolute inconceivable horror. I knew that there was this cave of knowledge at the beginning to kind of tutorialize as much as kind of the game throws you a bone, I guess, in terms of gently easing you in, quote unquote, gently. But that experience was okay. I was like, okay, I see what's happening here. I think I'm getting a hang of the, mechanics of it and like this sort of thing. And I even went back and went through it again just to really make sure that I got it. Because as I said a minute ago, I really wanted to give this a good go. So I really wanted to sort of focus and concentrate and like really do it right. Justice sort of thing, almost. Like I felt like I did justice to myself. And sure enough, by the time I got to certainly that area, I think where the large knight comes out of those Gatefront Ruins, I think that was my first death.
Yeah.
But elsewhere as well, when I just sort of bumbling around and even going to some of the areas that I'd already explored in the technical test to an extent, it just didn't seem to be working. Like, I couldn't quite get the hang of any of the mechanics. And at that point I was like, oh God, I've really invested in sort of getting through this game now, or not, or getting into it at the very least. And now I feel as though even after some levels and finding some sites of grace, exploring the map a little bit, I wasn't digging it at all. Not that I wasn't enjoying it at all, but just it never felt like I was getting a handle on improving. And obviously, although you die a lot in these games, you hope that you can improve and feel
right.
like you're getting somewhere rather than just constantly ramming your head against a brick wall. So after trying as an astrologer, I thought that all hope was lost. But in the end, I went back to the beginning, restarted as a confessor instead, because after reading through the stats, basically, because I didn't even realize at the time that you could push the PS5 trackpad and get the kind of more bio description option of what the classes were, because I was like, what the hell is that button? Because I'm just such a noob, obviously. But anyway, so confessor was what it ended up being, but I knew I wasn't going to have a huge emphasis on the sort of magical side of it, but I wanted that option sort of thing, so I didn't want to go for just a super hardcore non-magic build. The standard sword and shield combat, as you say, having some ability to guard counter immediately sort of changes how you approach encounters, but that proved to be the key difference, if you like, that really made the whole game kind of come alive, and I felt like I was getting momentum and actually getting into the whole experience. So that leads us to entering Limgrave, our first impressions of the world, the spectacle, the beautiful flowing tree, the Erd tree. Is it that's how you pronounce it? What was once you kind of opened those doors, how did you take it all in?
So I'm not sure if this is just because I have anxiety in general, or if I just built this up in my head too much. But as soon as I opened the doors, like literally opened the doors in Elden Ring to go out into the world, my first thought was, I'm very scared. I was very, very scared. I thought I was going to die instantly, or things were just going to fall from the sky and kill me immediately. And I was just terrified. After calming down a little bit, I think I had the same impression as probably anyone else who played the game, which is that it's just gorgeous. It's probably one of the most gorgeous sceneries in any game that I've seen ever, which is really cool. But to be honest, so when you first go out into the world, the tree sentinel is like right there, and so pretty much the first thing I did was go over and try to fight him. Oh no. That went really, that went like how you would imagine it went. So I left there pretty quickly, but I was actually too afraid to really explore. I ended up going straight to the Gatefront ruins somehow, and I stayed there for, gosh, I don't even know. It was a stupidly long time, like totally embarrassing how long I spent at the Gatefront ruins. It was probably like 10 hours that I spent there, just like trying to learn how to hit things without dying. So all this to say, I didn't actually do a ton of exploring right at the beginning of the game. I kind of just stayed in one place, too afraid to leave until I got better at stuff, which probably contributed to my... Okay, I'll just put it bluntly. I didn't like Elden Ring at first. Like for the first, I don't know.
Ooh, this is controversial. We've been cancelled. I've just heard.
Yes, I'm sorry, but I didn't like it. It really did feel like, how other people who aren't into the Souls games, they'll describe it as just banging your head on a wall over and over. That's how it felt to me. It was very pretty. I liked the scenery, but that was about it for me at the beginning. But I was so determined to give it a real chance. So I remember telling my husband, I refuse to quit until I feel like I'm decent at the game. And then if I don't like it at that point, then okay, then it's fine for me to quit.
Because then you're leaving it on your own terms. You're not being defeated by it, right? Because
exactly.
You'll be like, I don't need you. You need me.
Yes, so it's exactly like that. So that was kind of my first overall impression of the game. What was your experience like when you first started?
Yeah, so because I obviously delved into this technical test, I was like, okay, I'm sure there was a bit of false bravado there, a bit of false confidence in play as well, which is what made it more distressing when I was astrologer to death. But yeah, so I went in and obviously I did the Cave of Knowledge again as a second time round class almost. And I think that because I'd almost wiped from my memory my first experience of delving out into the world. But although I didn't have the same sense of awe as I'd had the very, very first time that I opened those doors into the Limgrave, I agree definitely that there's something about the design of the world which gives you a sense of scale. I mean, I appreciate it is a big game in a literal
Huge
sense as well. Like, and obviously the map that you see all around when you first start is only a fraction. And even now, after dozens of hours, I've still not completed. No, I've still not conquered the map. I've still not, any of this stuff. But at the same time, just that initial vista and the size of the Erdtree itself just gives you that sense of scale and grandiose vibes, I suppose, in terms of what the game has in store for you. And I obviously, again, from what I've picked up from previous SoulsBorne games, I know that there's often these huge bosses and like real kind of like with ridiculously sized weapons and reach and this sort of stuff. And like, so I was kind of in a similar place to you, I think, it's kind of mixture of awe and terror. But because I knew that I knew a few specific things that I could kind of point myself towards almost at that point, although I didn't know anything about Stormveil or any of the more story-based stuff. I felt a bit kind of more confident in just kind of delving out and trying to explore the map a little bit, but I never really kind of really pushed it. And in a similar way, I think I ended up going through the Gatefront Ruins area a fair number of times as well, just kind of farming my way up some runes to be like, okay, I feel like I can like level up whatever now and actually not be horribly killed instantly all the time or whatever. And then that's in a similar place or in a similar location there, you're obviously introduced to Torrent, which is a whole other game changer, which we'll get onto later. But yeah, I think that was really kind of that kind of first impression. And as you say, I was close to, throwing in the towel from that early playthrough, but it feels like a bit of a cop out to say, like, when a game is marketing itself as, oh, you need to play the first 10 like 10, 20, 30 hours, and then it gets good or whatever.
Right.
And like, I always kind of I don't dismiss that, but I think like, well, firstly, if the intent of the game is to give all players that experience, then obviously that's up to the developers. That's what they want to do. That's fine. But from a player's point of view, as a player with a limited time,
right,
as we all have, if I absolutely need under capital letters underlined to invest 30 hours in something before I enjoy it at all, then it's not happening. Like, I don't have that freedom at this point in my life, I suppose, with working full time and other boring grown up responsibilities to do that.
Yeah.
So that brings us on to Lay Out Your Arms, as I've cleverly titled it. I'm impressing only myself. I'm very aware. The combat and the gameplay, which obviously we've already touched on, but like that learning curve of combat, I think went in a way that I didn't expect. And I think you probably, by the sounds of it, you had that sort of discovery in those Gatefront Ruins.
Yeah, to some degree. I definitely think I improved after leaving the Gatefront Ruins, but I had this experience with Elden Ring that I haven't had in any other game. Like every other game I've played, it's either I can pick it up pretty quick or I just have no interest in it. Like I'm not going to play it. I'm done. I'm out. With this game, I'm convinced I picked it up a lot slower probably than most people. I just sucked. Straight up, I just sucked at this game. But it was so cool.
There are like so many people out there like nodding right now. I can feel the nod.
Yeah, most likely. But so eventually it was really cool to fight bosses over time and eventually notice like I would get really, really juiced whenever I would like successfully dodge something like 3 times in a row. I was like, oh my God, guys, look, I'm still alive. Like I'm like 30 seconds into this battle and I haven't died yet. And then, the 30 seconds would expand as time would go on. And it was really cool to very clearly see that I was getting better as time went on. And I know that sounds so simple, like, yeah, Stephanie, you play a game over time, you get better, but like that just I just haven't had an experience like that really with other games. It hasn't been so clear to see like that in other games.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I definitely think that maybe it's the secret sauce, maybe it's, you know, a bit of luck, a bit of magic, who knows? But like by the sounds of it, From Software have a kind of certain skill to tap into the almost primal urge to improve, and to kind of earn that reward, as you say, like, to want to push yourself through hardship, almost to feel like you deserve to be better at something. Because I think a lot of games, especially ones which are more kind of just straightforward games, not even necessarily for kids or anything like that, but just more conventional, I suppose. You don't necessarily, if you're challenged repeatedly over and over and you're not going anywhere, then the game will throw you a lifeline, or will kind of make those sorts of compromises for you, so you don't have to keep banging your head against the wall. You can go a different way, or you can do a different thing, Whereas, particularly Elden Ring from our experience, but I'm sure many other players would say from other games in the genre as well, FromSoft just don't do that. They're just like tough.
Well, yeah. I mean, to be fair, they do. So with Elden Ring, you can, like, if you run into something that's too hard, you can leave and like go somewhere else to, I don't know, gain more levels or fight some stuff that's easier. Well, yeah, but I
mean, that's the thing I was going to get to, actually, because thinking about the journey of gameplay, one was something that I talked about when I reviewed this as well, is from my point of view, I reached the hilltop area with the 5 trolls on it, or 1,000 runes each. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do. This is gonna be my area now. I got the War Master Shack, the Site of Grace, and that was my home base. And having looked it up afterwards, I was like, this is a well-known farming spot. And I was like, well, okay, obviously it's fairly obvious if I found it, but I was determined to sort of get the hang of this specific enemy, because 5 enemies, all the same theoretically, and a specific arena to take them on one by one or multiple at a time, or however you want to approach it. Although if you do it at night, there's a optional boss called Deathbird that comes down and eats your face. So I realized that after at one point or other, where I managed to not die somehow. The journey itself was that even though I could take on these enemies and occasionally do reasonably well at taking them down, or taking multiple down without being killed, I could not play the game consistently. Like, I would do one run and I would kill 2 of them maybe, and I'd die. I would come back to life again and be like, okay, I know where my runes are. Thankfully, they're out of sight of any of the trolls, so I can go and grab them, and I'm back to where I was, and flasks refilled, all that good stuff. But then I'd take on these enemies in exactly the same way as I did the first time, and I would die.
Yep.
And that would be the end. That was the experience over and over. Like, I would do really well. I would clear the whole field. I would like, wow, I'm finally having a breakthrough. And the next time I would just die instantly. I was like, what is this?
Yep. And definitely had a lot of that myself as well.
And I think that's the problem with the way you think about this sort of a game, because I don't think you can rely on that. Like, the game changes deliberately, not changes, but like the enemies respond deliberately, not always in exactly the same way, I suppose, to almost counter that. And I think that's a really interesting part of this experience. Next up, great enemy felled boss encounters. Now, no doubt, coming into this, even for a super noob like we were, we fully expected there to be some pretty balls hard boss encounters. What was your approach? What was your experience of that side of it?
Well, so I just want to start by saying that eventually the bosses in Elden Ring have become like my favorite thing ever. Beating really any of them. Well, no, that's not fair. Most of them. It feels like this amazing rush and accomplishment. Like I've never literally physically jumped off of the couch and been like, yeah, you take that. Like, I got you. You know, like it just seems so dramatic. But then when I'm playing Elden Ring, like that's exactly what my experience was whenever, like when I first took down that tree sentinel, that was like the first major. It sounds funny now to say major now that I've played more of the game. But at the time, it felt like the first major hard boss that I took down. And I was like so excited. I barely scraped by. I almost died. Well, definitely died many times before the time in which I actually succeeded. But yeah, it was just such a unique experience. Part of what's been funny. So like, what is his name? Moog, Lord of Blood, I think.
Yep.
I discovered him like way too early. And like totally by accident, I went in there not knowing what I was doing. I don't remember how this happened, but I remember hitting him with like a magic glintstone attack, like the really basic one or whatever. And I am convinced it did 0 damage. Like I know it hit him because it showed a little number, but like it was a single digit number, and I'm convinced it was 0 because it did not affect his bar at all. And the first time he touched me, I was just dead instantly. And I laughed so hard at that experience. It was just hilarious, and I loved it. I feel like I'm just rambling about nothing in particular, but all in all, I guess
there's a definite like gallows humor to the boss fights themselves because go into it knowing they're going to be hard, and even when you feel like you've gone away and you've leveled up and you've retooled your build and you've got a new shield or whatever, you come back into it and then like just as bad as the first time, and you're like, well, what the hell am I doing here? I think so. I put, especially knowing where Margit was, I put off that battle considerably. Like I deliberately avoided it for a long time.
It did the same thing.
I think I was about level 34 maybe before I went back finally to do that fight. Because I just didn't want to. Partly, I didn't want to go into that fight. Well, I did try it before that, to be fair, but I didn't want to go into that fight and be beaten to a pulp so much and so many times that I would just be, my momentum in the game would be knocked, and I just wouldn't want to play it anymore in the first place, because I think that could have been a danger if I had just sort of really focused, overly or fixated on it. And I think in a way that's the benefit of what you were saying about how, you can just pick another compass point, off you go in that direction, and there's other stuff, and it's cool, But I think partly as well, I wanted to feel like I was in control of the fight when I won. Like I wasn't just spamming my way through in a kind of like frantic. I mean, obviously it's frantic to an extent always, but like I wanted to feel like I knew what I was doing a bit at least.
Yeah.
Before I jumped into that arena, and so by the time I came back, I think I did use the spirit summons, and I did use the additional NPC summons. I don't know what they're all called. To take the edge off, as it were. And obviously, I'm sure some people will be shaking their heads furiously, even as I say those words. But I don't care. But ultimately, the battle was mine, and that was and as you say, when you finally got to defeating one of these enemies, it is really rewarding, because partly as well, there are so many cheap deaths, or what feel like cheap deaths, throughout the rest of the game, where you're just sort of bumbling around, and then someone's behind a corner and like comes out at you, and you're just like, what the hell? I think in the start of it wasn't even Stormvale, I don't think, I can't remember, or at the beginning of Stormvale possibly, where you're just bumbling around, and then there's a Black Knight in a room.
Oh, I hate that guy. I hate that guy so much. He creeped me out so bad. And yes, that was in Stormvale Castle. Yes,
it was. Thank you. But yeah, so I knew that there would be nasty enemies in there and stuff, and that and whatever. But the fact that was so abrupt, I was so abruptly killed,
Yep, me too.
After sort of being very, very carefully, sneakily, and again, I wasn't feeling super confident, wasn't ever thinking, I've got this, no problem at all. But at the same time, you're suddenly, you're humbled. And I think that's a real theme, isn't it, for this sort of experience almost when you're like, as soon as you feel like you're getting somewhere, you go to a different area and then, oh, my weapon doesn't really work on these guys because fire or magic or whatever. So yeah, it's fun times. But I think overall, I've probably not done as many bosses as I could have. Not that I've avoided them necessarily, but I've been consistently very bad at finding things in this game. I don't know what it is. Like I know, as I say, I've watched some Let's Play coverage of other people going through it and who are all great. And it's been really nice them discovering some of the things that I did discover by myself without any kind of prompting or having any knowledge of them or whatever. But at the same time, they then find things and I'm like, where the hell is this? What is this? Where are this?
Yes.
Or where is this cave of horrible, nightmarish horror and stuff? And that's why I think I've not been in a rush to kind of really scour every corner, because I think that sense of discovery is part of what makes the world itself really, really rich and really strong.
Yeah, for sure.
Which actually brings us on to the Lands Between in general, coming in with your expectations, particularly about George's involvement in the lore and all this sort of stuff. How did the reality sort of measure up to that?
So I remember, I can't remember if I actually put this in the review that I wrote or not, but I posted it somewhere. I came to Elden Ring initially mostly because of George R.R. Martin's involvement, but I did not end up staying for that. It doesn't, to be totally honest, and this is probably going to make some people really angry, but I don't play Elden Ring whatsoever for the lore and the quote unquote story, if you can call it that, I guess. I get that some people really, really enjoy getting like the little bits of lore from all over the land and like trying to piece it together and stuff, but that is just not for me. Like I end up kind of blowing through the dialogue and I ended up staying
because some of the time you're like, well, whatever I say doesn't matter anyway. What I'm talking about,
Yes.
or the end of an encounter is either I kill you or
I just kind of feel like I was always just reading some obscure puzzle, no matter who I was talking to. That's just how it felt, and I was like, you know what, I don't.
Yeah, there'll be like general comments like, yes, you want to go to the east tower of the such and such place or whatever, and you're like, maybe I do, maybe I don't. I'll find my way there eventually if I feel like it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Leave me alone.
Yep. My style is definitely more just wander around. That's basically how I've been playing this game the entire time, and it's been working out pretty well for me, although I will definitely admit that if guides did not exist, I would never complete like probably 95% of these quests because they're just yeah, I think that's interesting because I've thought about this before the game even came out, like how reliant almost you are on people being able to read around some of these things or like collaborate. Obviously the messages is another side. Maybe I'll come on to in a second as well. But like generally the community and the the amount of depth that there is in all of these things and the references and all that sort of stuff. It's very hidden almost, almost nothing is on the surface. And even the things that the game tells you, well, in what probably it considers a straightforward way, are not that straightforwardly explained. Like there's not this was never supposed to, I assume this was never supposed to be a user-friendly experience overall. You know what I mean? Like obviously you start the game, you go through all of the different menu tabs, and whenever you open a tab, it's like, this menu is for blah, 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 or whatever. And you're like, cool, yeah, great, love it. And then you actually go to use that menu at any time for anything. And you're like, well, nothing around here is explained at all. So what was the point of that blurb? What's the point of that blurb at the beginning if it didn't actually tell me anything that I need to know? And like, again, like the interface, like it took me about, I don't know, 5 hours maybe to realize that
Oh yeah, I didn't think I had a magic item to begin with to use my magic or arcane or whichever way around it all
Oh
is.
yeah.
But I actually did, and I just didn't have it equipped because it was where my shield is equipped because I was sword and shield all the time. So
Right.
I then realized when I changed and pressed a button by mistake at some point, and I did like the emergency heal charm,
Oh yeah,
or whatever
right.
it's called, and I was like, oh right, okay, so that's what that is.
Yeah, I
And
wouldn't
I
have.
could have been using that the whole time, but never mind.
Yeah, I had the same actually with healing. I remember I bought like a healing spell thing, urgent heal, I think it was called. And I had no clue how to use it. I was so frustrated. Like I went to my husband and was like, I don't get it. I have it equipped. I have the faith requirement for it.
Yep.
Like, why can't I use this? I don't understand. So that's another instance where, again, if I couldn't just like hop on Google and be like, why isn't urgent heal working? It led me to figuring out that I needed the other piece equipped, or I need to buy it and equip it.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing. Like maybe the game is at war with itself. I don't know the explanation, but it feels as though the quote unquote default build, if you like, is the way that all of the tooltips and help have been constructed. Therefore, anything that's actually useful is all about combat and all of the standard combat, if you like, rather than magic hybrid combat or whatever. It's not like there's a lot of signposting for the more specific ways some of the classes can be used.
Yeah. I was going to say something else on the story aspect of this game, but I can't remember what I was going to say anymore.
Well, from my point of view, when it comes to story, I would agree. I think the George R. R. Martin stuff it's an interesting bit of IMDb trivia, if you will, but it's not like in any way very apparent to me at any point.
Yeah.
And especially comparing it with what I know from Bloodborne and other games, which I've obviously, because I've watched the more condensed, I guess, gameplay from some of them, I've probably by osmosis absorbed more of the story than I would probably playing them in a way, because it's just been a bit more bite-sized and coherent, rather than me running around like a maniac and being unable to follow anything. But it actually reminds me of the resurrected version of Diablo 2, which they did recently, which Blizzard did last year. There is a really over-the-top CGI cutscene at the beginning, which introduces the whole story and like the inciting incident of the plot and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's so far removed from the actual gameplay. You're like, well, none of this is relevant at all. So what the hell? And it really struck me when I started Elden Ring. Obviously, you get the introductory sequence, and you're like, "Ooh, yes, very Lord of the Rings,"
Mm-hmm.
and then the game starts, and you're like, "Oh, okay, well, clearly this world is just existing, and you can do whatever you want, and no one cares." So
yeah,
that's fine.
pretty much.
It's not like there are, although obviously there are forces within the world which do act, and things change when you either do or don't do things.
Right.
It's not as if you are wandering around Middle-earth and all of the time while you're playing, Sauron's armies are gathering and like the amount of enemies is building and this sort of thing. It's all very inconsequential to the actual gameplay. So you could literally continue grinding those trolls for 100 hours if you wanted to. You could gain however many levels in that time. For me, it would be 7 levels probably. No. A huge, a ridiculous amount of time and runes and experience and whatever. But the game's not fussed about you. No, the game doesn't care about you almost. The story, although you're obviously, when you go through the specific story beats, you do, the end of the game is you want to become the Elden, or you want to, I don't know, someone wants you to become the Elden Lord and restore the balance in the Force or whatever. But that's not like important, it's not really significant enough for you to drive your experience,
right?
Unless that's the only thing you focus on, and in which case you kind of almost miss the point a little bit, because I think the fact that this game is open world is what makes it work more than the other games in the past, for me, certainly for me anyway.
Yeah.
Because there is that choice, and there is, as you said, the fact that you can mix it up. It does help. In exploring the world, this brings me on to Torrent, the most trustworthy of all allies in the game. Did you? Was it a game changer for you?
Yes, definitely. Torrent saved my butt many, many, many times. I also felt like Torrent was probably the major reason that I felt okay to explore. Because, like I said, when I started the game, I had so much anxiety about dying. Like, I felt like I didn't want to go anywhere. But then once I got Torrent, that kind of, I mean, yes, I still died at times running around on my horse, but you can kind of like bypass a lot of things. Which I would always end up going back to eventually, but
the power of running away is strong.
Yes.
Just to give, I mean, presumably everyone knows this if they've got to this point. So, but if you haven't, hi. Torrent is a magical horse.
Oh, right. Yeah, maybe I should have started with that.
And but that's really all you need to know. I mean, there was some preamble given as to why he has chosen you, which always makes you feel important, of course, as a player. Yes. But I think ultimately the fact that it is so much at your beck and call, obviously you have to have the item equipped, yada, yada, but it is literally a button press away and then you can just leap off even as you're galloping and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think Torrent was probably the biggest factor for me that made the game more accessible, as they were saying. So
yeah. I think one description on that front actually, which I will bring up because I thought was a good point, is although accessible is a kind of natural word to use, probably a better word to use is approachable.
Oh my gosh, yes, you're right. I totally need to fix that about my language. I'm glad you... No, seriously, I posted about that not that long ago because I need people to point that out to me. And I think a lot of people make that mistake too. And I'm obviously, as you heard, totally guilty myself. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up.
And no worries. And I think that's it. You know, let's not diverge too much into an accessibility, approachability debate en masse, because I think really that's not the point of what we're talking about here today. But what I will say is, from that point of view, absolutely, like the inclusion of Torrent as a device, if you like, to give you a different option when you're approaching battles is an absolute game changer. Like, there's no question. You know, but again, you can completely ignore if you want to.
Yep.
As we begin to approach the conclusion of our tale, I thought it might be nice to talk about sites of grace, or in more general terms, memorable moments and stuff we enjoyed discovering, since sites of grace are so integral to you effectively exploring the map without, as you say, that absolute fear of dying in the middle of nowhere and have no way to get back there.
Well, I have a little list. So definitely...
I love a list.
So discovering the Eternal City was one of the most memorable moments for me because it was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen in any video game ever. So wow. That's going to stand out to me forever. And then I remember the time I was the most scared when playing Elden Ring. I was running around on my horse, minding my own business, and I came across this gigantic dragon. Like, it was surrounded by a bunch of smaller dragons, and there was this huge dragon. And when it sees you, it's like, it gives this like horrible roar, and then all the little dragons around it, all their eyes turn red or something, and like,
oh god,
I've just never had more fear than in that moment. Nothing actually ended up happening, but it was just such a crazy moment for me. But before I hand it over to you, I just want to also call attention to some of the really bizarre, hilarious things that happened in this game. Like, I went up to this really weak zombie dude, and I was killing all the other ones in one hit, and then I hit this guy, and then when I hit him, he turned into this massive bear monster that like mauled me immediately, and I died. I was like, I remember just sitting there looking at the screen where it said "you died," and I was like, what? What just happened? I was like in shock. I did not understand at all. It took me like a full minute to move on. But that was definitely one of my more memorable moments playing the game.
I mean, I think it's packed with those sorts of random leaps in logic, and I think that's what makes it. I mean, from my point of view, near the War Master Shack in when I was actually exploring a little bit more, because that area of woods next to War Master Shack is one of the most prolific areas for raining wolves.
Oh my gosh! Yes, yes,
which is definitely I think everyone who's had that first experience and they're like, what is happening?
Yep.
That in general is just sort of a beautiful moment. I get to a point traversing that area now where I'm like, if I go this way, I don't trigger them. But I think that was kind of part of the joy of exploring that area in a way. But just beyond that, underneath the broken bridge itself, there's a summons which is designed to teach you about the antagonist summons ultimately, because it's effectively a tutorial for the fact that an enemy player can invade you theoretically at any time. And my God, that character whose name I've immediately blanked on, but is well, not even that difficult, I'm sure, to kill, but like just so ridiculous. He has a giant flaming hammer, and that became my goal for a time. This was before I'd taken out any bosses or done any meaningful, any meaningful anything really. So I've just been, as I say, I've been going out the trolls and gradually grinding my way through the game.
Right.
But I was like, I have to be able to defeat this guy. There has to be a way, and I have to be able to do it and it not feel jammy, it feel earned, because that was the stepping stone towards me actually branching out into the rest of the game. So I would go for it. I'd run up there, and then it was like, you are being invaded by whomever, hibiscus or something, and then you see him in the distance, and it's almost like that Monty Python sketch from the meaning of from the Holy Grail, where so Galahad is miles away and he's running, and then it cuts back, and then cuts back to him, and he's still running, and it cuts back. He's so far away and just runs straight towards you. And then obviously you can tackle him in a number of ways. You can't ride Torrent, so you're entirely ground bound. But with a combination of, actually using the powers that the game gives you to dodge and all this sort of stuff, you can get there. So even though that it wasn't that difficult an encounter overall, the fact that I finally got there after doing it God knows how many times was that moment of triumph. And I think that's a real kind of, I guess, feels like a defining stepping stone in me really
Absolutely.
Embracing this game. And that's exactly the sort of the thing that was missing from before.
Yes.
So what are our kind of overall reflections now? So how many, I can't remember how many hours in I am, but it's certainly not over 100. I think you are over 100, right? Overall?
No, actually, I had two different places I was playing this game, actually. So I think, on the file I have now, I have about 50 hours. And then on my other file, I believe it was around 20 some. So I'm probably around 75 hours at this point. Yeah. But yeah, okay, so overall reflections on this game. I think a lot of people feel like you have to basically get through a bunch of crappy, difficult, uninteresting gameplay in the beginning in order to kind of unlock the appreciation for this game, which in a way, like that's kind of true. Like I mentioned before, I had a really hard time in the beginning and I wasn't enjoying it. But I realized somewhere within that transition, it's not like it's bad and then once you get it, it's good. It was bad for me right in the beginning, but I realized that I was really transforming the way that I thought about the game as I was going. It wasn't like a sudden switch flipped where I was like, okay, I get it now. To an extent, I got that, but I actually ended up liking the process of getting good, so to speak. I ended up enjoying that, and this is by far the most rewarding game I have ever played, and it feels like it's going to be the most rewarding game I ever do play. I guess unless I go back, play the other FromSoft games, but we'll see about that. But yeah, this was one of the best games I've ever played, just because the combat is so amazing, the monsters are so interesting, and I like the variation. It doesn't feel repetitive at all for me. And then just the world is gorgeous, and I loved that part. So yeah, overall, it was an amazing game for me.
So overall, yeah. Oh, it sounds like that's a definite all right from Steph.
Yes.
No hyperbole there at all. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more in a lot of ways. I think the game experience was a journey, and I think that's part of the intent of it, because whether it's like to the nitty gritty of like what item you choose when you create your character, and like one of them is like one extra flask and it's a one use thing, and I used it immediately and wasted it, and it was just gone, and I was like, but or alternatively, if you get that key thing, you can go into that secret area at the beginning, and I was like, I mean, it's a cool secret, not really a secret at all area, but that was also horribly difficult at the time as well, so I was like, never mind, I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
And like there's so much of that, I suppose, to the experience that you can fleet about and just kind of not worry about that too much. And I think the game doesn't punish you for making that choice ultimately. And I think because I put in the time to grind, not necessarily grind, but because I put in the time to build my confidence by building up levels ultimately. And by the time I did get into Margit, into Stormvale, and start to really get my teeth into the meat of the game overall, I was just feeling so much more confident with myself. Whereas if I just run straight into it, it just would have ground me down into a paste, and I would never have made it. You know, I would never have stuck it out. So overall, the game, it's clearly been a talking point for weeks, and will no doubt continue to be for a long, long time yet. And I think, Game of the Year discussion will come around, and it's hard to see what, from a gaming experience point of view, what else could come around the corner that's as unusual as this game, because although it sticks to the formula of the genre, if you like, while still changing a few things, and I'm sure people who are veterans will be like, yeah, no duh, this is what they're like,
Yeah.
But as an entry point, and from our point of view, that's where we have to come at it from,
right,
that's the joy of it. And you think back to those kind of defining games in our gaming history, and no doubt many, many others, your Ocarina of Times, and the ones that are always cited, well, any Zelda game basically, but like, the ones that are always cited throughout the years and kind of given this kind of held up beacon-like status. It's not hard to imagine that this game in a few years' time will be absolutely that. So,
yeah, I agree.
There we go. So thank you everyone for joining us wherever and whatever you are up to. Steph, how have you found this little chit chat?
I found it awesome. I mean, I'm always down for just sitting around and shooting the shit, so to speak, talking video games. So I thought this was pretty good.
That's good. I mean, I'm glad that, we managed to navigate both the technical challenges, the health challenges,
right.
A language barrier, obviously, because what am I talking about? And I think hopefully hopefully you have all had as much fun listening to these ramblings as we have, rambling them. If you did enjoy this little podcast, then give it a like, give it a share, all of that good stuff. Subscribe to Pass the Controller, and we may well return for more adventures in rambling at another time.
Yes.
If the demand is there. So basically continue harassing Steph, because she's the headliner here. I'm just kind of...
Stop. It's talking games with Steph and James, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So take care of yourselves, everyone, and hopefully we will see and hear you next time. Bye for now.